It's no use hiding, Herr Flick. Open the door. You've been nicked. Damn und blast! Defeated again! This week on Megan's Megacan, 2 Nazi trials, 1 old, 1 new, in 1 week. Welcome.
Good evening, everybody. This is the most recentest Megan's Megacan. I'm Megan, and I'm back, having been wonderfully substituted for by Konrad's brother, Basti, last week. And yes, very happy to be here virtually once again with lovely Konrad Werner. Hello, Konrad.
Hello. Why are we doing it like this week?
Why are we doing this like this? Well, good question. Because I am either being very sensible and socially conscious or entirely paranoid or a mixture of the two. And I have woken up with a sore throat and I think just hangover symptoms. And I've obviously convinced myself I have the Rona. So this morning I went and had one of the more bizarre experiences of my life, and partially bizarre because it just didn't even seem bizarre. So I queued up at a doctor's window with people wearing masks, and then I got a ticket with a number on it, and I got to then queue up at the like terrible looking caravan, like you wouldn't even be able to holiday in it. But I got in there. There were 2 doctors in there in the full white suits. It was horrible. And then they shoved a thing down my throat in this caravan.
A swab.
It was a swab. I really take my hat off to anybody who's had the nose one as well, because the mouth one was not fun. Okay. So I'm not feeling very well.
I thought they had to do both. I thought they had to do a nose and a mouth, but maybe
I think that's the more like secure, like that's like the definite one.
Right.
But they're not doing that with everyone because I think it tastes longer and it's gross. Okay. So I think I should be okay with just the old mouthy swab. But that's why we're doing
abundance
Zoom
again. We've decided to do it.
I think being very sensible, which is good. We're also not having any booze because I'm not feeling very well. Why are you not having a Megacan, Konrad?
Because I got leathered last night and I can't. I'm still getting my bearings on today.
Yes, I can understand that. I think this is actually my suspected case of Rona has worked out quite well because I would have forced you to drink a Megacan, I think.
Yeah.
I would have been all like annoying about it. I mean, like, it's medicinal. I brought you a gin and tonic. Which is the thing I say to hungover people because I'm awful. Yeah, so you had fun last night? Were you out at a secret rave?
No, it wasn't a secret rave, which they've turned out to be true. Remember when we did that story about how secret raves were like a kind of lie?
Yeah.
They were to a Financial Times journalist.
Yes.
And now there really are secret raves.
Well, there are now, yes, but there weren't at the time.
No, they're probably not, no.
No, so our story, I think, was correct. But yes, I think it's quite interesting. We're at an interesting Corona time now because everyone's like gone back to normal as if it never happened. Like I've been on holiday, you know, with the exception of the masks, we're all kind of just like, certainly I am going about business as usual. And now one of the other reasons I got tested is because there's like I'm about 3 connections away from a confirmed case.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, oh, yeah, it's now, I don't know. I wonder if we've had our fun and we're all going to be going back into lockdown a bit quicker. I'm not sure.
I have been amongst people all week.
Yes.
I've been on trains, wandering around strange cities, and in enclosed spaces with people wearing masks.
Okay, well, you had your masks on. That's good. But why were you doing all this? What are we going to talk about today?
Well, I went to 2 trials. I was going to tell you about these 2 trials I went to because they're quite important. Mm-hmm. And one of them was of Stephan B, the far-right extremist who killed 2 people outside a synagogue last October. Mm-hmm. And the other one was that was the beginning of that trial, and the other one was the conclusion of the trial of Bruno D. He was an SS guard in the Stutthof concentration camp.
Mm-hmm.
He was found guilty of over 5,000 counts of accessory to murder for working in the camp. He was a guard at the top of a tower, and it might well be, I mean, there are other investigations going on, but it's pretty likely that this will be the very last Holocaust-related trial anywhere in the world.
Wow.
Because everyone involved is so old. He's 93.
So what age was he at the time?
He was 17, and that was the unusual thing about the court, because it took place in like a young offenders, a juvenile court, and because he was 17 at the time when he started his service at the Stutthof camp.
Yeah.
And 75 years later, he was brought before a trial, a court. But that's because there is no statute of limitations on murder in Germany, so it's irrelevant how long ago the crime was committed if it was murder. So
he was found guilty.
He was found guilty, and he was given a 2-year suspended sentence, which is obviously quite a light punishment for that crime.
So some of the 5,000 counts of
accessory to murder.
Oh, okay. So do you think? I mean, this is just. I don't know what to think about a 93-year-old going on trial for something that happened when they were 17.
Well, yeah, that is. It's really not. I mean, that everyone is very aware of, like, I mean, that's why he got such a lenient sentence. No one wanted to see him in prison, and he was. It was really more about the importance of carrying out the trial in the first place, because Germany famously failed to carry out any trial like this until the 60s. And even then, it was only like the worst perpetrators in some concentration camps. So, and for a long time, the people who took part in the Holocaust, who stood guard in camps and rounded people up and took them on the trains, none of them were ever prosecuted for anything. And there were thousands of people that should have been prosecuted, and nothing ever happened. What happened was, in 2011, there was a precedent set with one court in Munich of a Ukrainian concentration camp guard, Ukrainian German concentration guard called John Demjanjuk. Big long story about him, but when that court decided in Munich that he was like liable for accessory to murder, that kind of opened the gates. Then that meant that all these investigations that had been going on into people who were still alive could now be carried out, and they could actually be prosecuted. So there've been like a few of these cases now. Yeah, I mean, what the important like background for it is like I said, that the German prosecutors and judges after the war simply didn't, pursue any of these cases at the time. And a lot of them were Nazis themselves, and that's why they didn't pursue it.
Yeah.
And this is like an attempt by a German judicial system, rather than, like the Nuremberg trials were set up by the Allies.
Yeah.
There were also like concentration camp trials in Poland. Poland did some trials and imprisoned some people, but in the late 40s. But for a German trial, for a German legal action, this hasn't happened before. So these are like the last few people, and what is really important about it is not so much the state prosecuting these people, but the fact that the co-plaintiffs are really the most important people. They're all Holocaust survivors.
Yeah.
So for this trial, this was the concentration camp Stutthof. Yeah. It was in occupied northern Poland. They found about 40 people who wanted to be co-plaintiffs, people living in Israel, the USA. A lot of them testified, and a lot of them were able to come to, and it was like a huge symbolic thing for them to be able to come to a German court and explain what happened to them and tell their stories. And that means a lot more than just sort of saying it in a documentary. That means like saying it in a court of law.
Yeah.
It's very meaningful. And one of the lawyers told me that his client, this 92-year-old guy from France, Henri Seidenberger, he testified in February in this court, and he was telling me that he couldn't sleep the night before. He was really nervous, and then once he gave his statement, he spent like 2 hours in court, and once he'd given his statement, he had this like sense of relief that he was able to get it out, and you have to imagine that, because he's not just speaking for himself, but he's speaking for all the people who died in the camp and all the people who died in the meantime who weren't able to speak.
Yeah.
So it was quite moving, and there was like quite a lot of those types of statements given, and a few of the co-plaintiffs died before the trial could begin.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the point of the trial, really, and that's what it was also important that he was found guilty, and the co-plaintiffs, a lot of them said, we don't want him necessarily to go to prison, like a suspended sentence is fine, but we want him to be found guilty, and we want him to listen. We want him to be sitting in court and listening to these stories,
And
what
was his defense? I mean, what was literally his defense arguing?
They were arguing like normally that he was very unimportant in the concentration camp system. He didn't personally kill anyone.
Okay.
He was only on the tower. He was only on the guard tower. He was like a small cog in the wheel. There's a cog in the machine. Was the kind of way it's phrased. But the judge dismissed that in the ruling, in the verdict in the end. She said, you can't say you were a cog in the machine, because you're a human being and you can make choices,
Yeah.
And he could have, a lot of, the argument was that unless you actively try to get yourself transferred away, which was possible, or you actively try to stop people being killed, you are guilty because you were part of this thing. If you weren't standing guard, people would have been able to escape, and that means that you are accessory to murder. That's the kind of anything that you do there.
Very interesting kind of thing, because in the one hand, you can, I can think of this kind of 17-year-old, it may not have occurred to him in afterwards, but of course you do, and you either kind of condemn a whole system. It's not really a defense to say, well, I was just part of the system or following orders or any of that.
Yeah.
Oof.
You can't just be passive. You can't just be passive from the law's point of view, and that was quite a new thing. And he didn't really, the way he spoke in court, he spoke himself and he apologized, and and the judge praised him as well for listening very attentively to all the testimonies, and there were also historians came in and explained what happened at the camp, and he claimed that a lot of the stuff was new to him, and that he didn't know why so many people were dying, and there was a psychiatrist did an assessment of him and said he's sort of simplifying a bit, but that he has a tendency to suppress memories, which he kind of confirmed himself, because the judge at one point asked him, "Did you ever talk about this when you were with children and grandchildren?" And he said, "No, I never did. I never wanted to. I wanted to forget."
You don't want to ever excuse that behavior or justify it or explain it away in any way. And he will have his own trauma from this that he's carried for however many years. Whoa.
Yeah.
So you were there on the very last day. It must have been quite what was the atmosphere like in the actual?
Well, I wasn't actually in the courtroom, I should say. I was in the media room next door because of Corona.
Still, in general, what was the?
None of the co-plaintiffs were there because of when the verdict was given, because they're also really old and they didn't want to travel during the Corona. A lot of them gave their testimony via video link as well, because of the coronavirus. It was only the ones that lived in Europe that were kind of came. So it wasn't as if there was this sort of solemn atmosphere. It was just it was a lot of reporters interviewing all the different lawyers that came out.
Okay.
There were like 6 or 7 lawyers for all the different co-plaintiffs, and then the defense lawyer came out and he spoke to the press, and they were, I mean, it was just like this. I felt like there was a sense of people were very aware of how important this trial was, and also that there was I think they were relieved that it had been concluded as well, because we've had a few of these trials that haven't been concluded in the last few years because the defendants have been too old to stand trial. They were too sick. One of them had dementia, and so they couldn't try him. So I think there was quite a lot of relief that it kind of came to this conclusion, and it was just relief for the sense of the German judicial system giving something, like offering a conclusion.
Yes,
that was the idea.
And specifically as you've said, like the German one, which perhaps is quite interesting considering the other trial.
So then 2 days before that,
you've had quite the week.
I went to a trial of a new Nazi, although he denies being a Nazi, and that is Stephan B, who he's 28 now, and he attempted to storm a synagogue in Halle, in the city of Halle, in October, and couldn't get in because all the weapons he had about 8 guns, were all homemade, and he'd made them over years. From he 3D printed them and knocked them together in a workshop based on stuff that you find on the dark web, like plans that you can find on the dark web, how to make these weapons. But they weren't very powerful. So he tried to shoot his way through a wooden door, and it didn't work. He had to give up, and in frustration, because this woman was walking past, and she had a go at him. She said, "What's all this noise here?" And then he shot her.
Brilliantly, older German lady move. She's just keep it down.
Yeah.
Disturbing the peace.
That was really horrible. And then he shot another man because he was thwarted in that, he drove down the road and went to a kebab shop and tried to kill people in there, and eventually killed one customer who was also like a white German. He said in his testimony, because he spoke in the trial, and he said that he thought he was Muslim. He was just totally racist. He was extremely racist. And it was really weird. That was a really weird atmosphere, because then I was in the courtroom, and the judge, it was really interesting because the co-plaintiffs in that were also a lot of Jewish people, because of the people everyone who was in the synagogue. There were about 50 people in the synagogue at the time. So he's being charged with attempted murder of those people.
Yeah.
So all those people were allowed to be co-plaintiffs if they wanted to be, which meant they can sit in the trial and they can ask him questions as well. And and then he was the whole day was just the judge cross-examining him and asking him to go through his whole life story and also what happened on that day. And he was very willing to answer. He was very keen to explain himself, and he was very he was I don't want people to think, he didn't say this, but he was I don't want people to think I'm mad, I really, really think this. I think that Europe is being taken over by Muslims, and the Jews are orchestrating it. He was totally open about his ideology. He didn't say, he didn't deny anything.
Yeah.
And he said, my plan was to kill as many Jews as possible, and if that didn't work, kill as many Muslims as possible. And he totally failed, mainly because the guns that he made were so shit. But that is pretty much the only reason. He said he was very directly influenced by the Christchurch attack that was a few months before. It was in March 2019. And he said he wanted to emulate that. He also, like the Christchurch one, he live streamed the whole attack.
Yeah.
He filmed. He had a helmet camera on. Yeah, and he was really he was a cross between really pathetic and also sort of sniggering all the way through, because he was kind of really aware of how much of a failure he was, and also you got an idea from when he talked about his life and how he'd grown up, how he'd he basically had no friends his whole life. He never had a girlfriend, had no friends his whole life. He had a sister who tried to, at first, he said when they were younger, she tried to like get him out and join. And then the judge asked him what happened to that. And he said, I don't know. It's not important anymore. I think she went and, had a family herself and just sort of, she had her own life to lead. But anyway, he joined the Bundeswehr for a few months and he started a chemistry degree. He gave both of those things up, partly because of illness, and then was just living with his parents. It was living with his mum, specifically. Mum and dad were split up. He was living with his mum and spent his whole time on the internet in like far-right American racist forums. That was like his life. That and making guns was his life. Yeah, it was really like he was like he had no like he was. It was weird because he was like guileless. He didn't have any when he was talking in the court. There was no sense that he was trying to prove like he was trying to win the court's favor, or he was trying to apologize, or he didn't show any remorse. He had like a little bit. He was a little bit unemotional. Like he couldn't. And there was a psychiatrist assessment that said he had like a deep personality disorder. He couldn't really. But he kind of was eager to explain everything that he was doing, and he talked the whole time. And the judge kept asking him questions, and made him go through the whole day, and it was also like kind of like it was also like weirdly because it was also kind of weirdly funny because he kept explaining about all the things that he fucked up. Like he said that he had to steal a taxi during his escape, and he said, then it turned out to be an automatic. I've never driven an automatic before, and then the whole thing lit up like the Enterprise, and he was like driving it up, driving this thing along the motorway, and they eventually crashed into a lorry, and then ran out and got caught by the police, and it was just like, yeah.
Well, it's
and he kept
this like very, very similar story that we're hearing time and time again. And I'm not going to be the first person by like several million to point out that these are just like young white men who are being radicalized because of far right ideology.
Yeah.
And now they're kind of like MO. And like we really need to do more about it.
Yeah. I mean,
so how does the judge then deal with that? Because that's very difficult because you've got this kind of like public forum. Was he just being allowed to kind of say whatever he wants? Was it like I don't know.
Well, she had her strategy was very much I'm going to let you speak, but you're going to answer my questions. I'm not going to let you do a monologue about it to explain it. Okay. I am going to ask you questions and you can answer them. And then at one point he used like a racial slur about Muslims, and she shut him down. She said like, you can't say words like that. You can't say things like that in this courtroom. You can explain your reasoning on what you think about the world, but if you use words like that, if you use any hate speech, I will shut you out from proceedings, which I am allowed to do. I can just like but that was it. Like it was, and also like the next day, which I wasn't there for, but then the next day the co-plaintiffs also had the chance to question him and also talk to him about it. So all the people. Because it wasn't just all the Jewish people in the synagogue who were there, but some of the friends and relatives of the guy he killed in the kebab shop were there. And some of the new owner of the kebab shop, who was also there on that day, who was shot at and who escaped. But a few people, he shot a lot of people while he was trying to escape. Yeah, and. So they were there too. It was just like it was strange being, I mean, I was quite far away from him, but it was strange hearing someone talk who was just so stuck in his own internet-driven world.
Yeah.
Like I imagine that it must be really weird for him now not to have the internet. I don't know what he does with his like time now, because he's just filled with all this sort of Jewish conspiracy stuff. You know, at one point he said like the Jews are responsible for the white genocide, and it was just like that can't be. That can't really be therapized away, you know. He's just really dangerous. Like he's really, really dangerous. Like you can't. This guy can never be in society again, because he will try and kill people.
No,
because he's like really just in it. He's just stuck in it. Maybe in 30 years' time he'll have. He did at one point. He complained that prison was full of Muslims. He said. He said that my whole corridor is Muslims. And
like I don't really have like anything to say. Like it sucks. And this is obviously like we're dealing with an incredibly extreme case. It's going to be interesting to see how this unfolds. But also, like to me, it doesn't seem like that must be really extreme and really hard to listen to when someone is so vitriolic and so sort of enmeshed in that kind of hate. But like I've sat in lots of classrooms and like online spaces with people who are somewhere along on that spectrum. And who want to like quote Ben Shapiro or like whatever those other ones, or are reading InfoWars all the time or Breitbart or whatever. So it's not like this is just like we need to do something about this whole spectrum, and it might be like too late, or we're never going to like you say, be able to do much about these like super extreme cases. But Germany needs to reckon seriously with this. Like all of the sort of westernized countries where young white men seem to do this kind of stuff need to deal with it better than they have been.
It does seem that Germany has a particular problem. Like I did see a stat this week saying that there were more cases of far-right violence in Germany than any other European country. But that, I don't know if that like depends on how they count these things, or I don't know. But yeah, but it does seem to happen quite a lot here, especially with there's a lot of stuff about the police. You might have remembered we talked about Horst Seehofer a couple of weeks ago.
Do not get me fucking started. Like this, and this is exactly the hypocritical bullshit that I am talking about from the German politicians. On the one hand, we're having like an absolutely necessary and it should be done like really meaningful trials of 93-year-old perpetrators of Nazi crimes. And we're all like wringing our hands over this like court case starting. It's not in Halle, the case, is it? He's been tried in...
No, they had to do it in Magdeburg because there was no courtroom big enough in Halle.
Okay. Stephan B, is that his name? Stephan B?
Yeah.
Anyway, so we've got all of this and we're like, this is terrible. You're not allowed to say this in court. I will And then we've got our interior minister who's saying, we don't need to investigate systemic and institutionalized racism in the police because it's just not a thing, because it's already forbidden and the police apparently don't break any laws. Like, what is that?
Yeah.
For a government policy in a country where you've got far right, like, and it is all linked. Like, we know we have a far right problem with the police and the Bundeswehr.
Yeah.
Like, this lad is in the Bundeswehr. If he's not being picked up, how long was he in there? Like, red flags should be raised if we had proper systems. Because you know he didn't keep his mouth shut with this stuff when he was in the Bundeswehr. If he's not keeping it shut in his own criminal trial for being a Nazi, What are they
Yeah, there's
doing?
no appetite for exploring the links between things. They just shut it down when there's like a criminal, when something happens.
Unless it was like pre 1945, maybe pre fall of the wall. I don't know. Then maybe they're interested. But like, I, where's Horst? We're gonna have to get him on. I'm fucking raging. I don't even have to booze this week to like soften the pill. Just got this horrible ginger tea that I've made myself. It's just bits of ginger floating around in a fucking bottle. Oh.
Why didn't you make slices of ginger instead of? I often, when I do a ginger tea, I make slices and then I just chew the slice.
I chew just the cat's pajamas. No, I did because I had some scrapings of ginger from making like noodles earlier, and I didn't want to waste them.
Oh, I see. Yeah,
but then
lovely.
I also got a slice in there and some honey and an apple tea bag. But it's all horrible. It looks like a dirty drain in this big cup.
Well, maybe you'll feel better in the morning.
Huh?
Maybe you'll feel better in the morning.
Maybe I'll feel better in the morning. Yeah, you're exactly right. This lack of appetite to investigate the links between things is insane. And you have to wonder then, how much of Horst Seehofer, like beneath that surface, do we have to scratch to be like, why don't you want to investigate this?
I don't know. I think he's just old and he doesn't understand.
I think that's charitable.
And I think he's under pressure from the police unions, I think, as well.
Oh, well, heaven forfend anybody just do the right thing, regardless of age or whether the police unions are. But like, again, if you are a police union, why would you, as the police, they're like, it's insane. Like, if we're going to follow like the police's logic, right? What are they always saying? Well, it's the police. We're acting in your interest. Unless you've done something wrong, you've got nothing to fear from us. So why don't they apply that same logic to themselves? If you're not a pack of like crazy racists with no structures in you to stop people being crazy racist, then you'll be fine. Or if we follow Horst's logic, do we need the police at all? Because apparently, like, things just being forbidden is enough that nobody does them. So, like, has he just actually produced like a really good argument for defunding and dismantling the police service? Maybe we should be thanking him. I don't know.
On that bombshell.
All hot in the face.
Secretly supports defunding the police.
Maybe that's it. Maybe he's playing an absolute blinder. Like we were convinced Corbyn was. Oh, God. Yeah.
Anyway.
Is that it?
I'm trying to think of some happy news for next week.
It's fine. I'll know if I've got the Rona or not. So.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting either way.
I'm sure you haven't got it.
No, I don't think I have it. If I do, it's bloody Horst Seehofer's fault. Decided.
Send him the bill.
Yes. Anyway, thank you for that. It's good to get first-hand account of these things.
I found it quite a moving week in one way.
I can imagine it was quite a rough week.
But I felt I felt like I felt glad to be there. Like I was glad that I could witness it. Really.
Yeah.
Both of the trials. It was quite moving.
And I guess we'll see how the
people are bad. You know, people do bad stuff, and people don't. I think that especially with the SS one, I really felt like this shows what like the doing nothing. This really shows that truth about, you know, like if you do nothing, it's just as bad instead of doing something bad. And that's all he did. He did nothing. Like he just didn't do anything. He didn't try and find a way out. He didn't try and like, you know, he didn't try and not take part. And that's what they had to do.
Yeah.
That's that of your guilt, you know.
It is a salient Do I mean salient? I'm going to go with salient. Like reminder to, I think, us all maybe in these very weird times, and a moment in history that will undoubtedly be studied for generations to come if the world continues to exist in a former history study. But yeah, doing nothing is it's not really an option.
No. All right then.
You don't have to do anything today because you are tired and you have a hangover. So I allow you to do. We can both do nothing for today.
Good.
Okay.
Bye.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for listening. Please stay healthy. Wear your masks.
Wear your mask. Bye.